Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's episode of the Efficiency Equation podcast. Great to have you here, Konstantin.
Thank you.
I am 100% sure that you're going to guess what today's topic is, because it can't be anything other than tariffs and how they impact manufacturing, more specifically, the lives of you production planners and plant managers who are responsible for creating good product at your facilities. Obviously, the world is turning upside down, and we want to decouple and make sense and figure out what's going on as much as it is possible with Konstantin. So, Konstantin, my first question is, you've been talking to a lot of clients. Are people freaking out right now?
A good way to put it would be to say that there is a state of confusion. But yes, there is this anxiety. I don't know if there's panic. I certainly hope not, maybe in some areas, but there is this overall anxiety in that people want to have clarity on a sense of direction, and people want to see what's going to happen in the future. And you can tell if you look at the stock market, it's been losing value. And as the economists say, that the stock market, its job is to look forward and be the judge of the progress that's on the horizon, So if the stock market is crashing, that tells you that there is a lack of optimism in the future prospects there. But yeah, we've seen a lot of volatility recently. And so people just generally want to know in what mode of operation they need to plan to continue to operate. And we're already seeing the impact of tariffs in terms of business operations with our clients.
Okay, so let's start with that. What is going on the ground right now, as we still have a 90-day pause, but obviously tariffs are coming. So what are you seeing? What are companies doing right now?
U.S. manufacturers shipping product to Canada, they already have looked at how the whole logistics need to be adjusted to make sure that the tariffs are included when they need to be included. And honestly, I'm confused myself right now with the 90-day pause about whether the tariffs that were discussed just prior to the 90-day pause, whether they're still applicable or not. And it's not because I lack information and I don't do my homework. No, I do my homework, but things tend to creep up, like the surprise with the tariffs on China, where we just found out that there is a carve out for smartphones manufacturers. There is a 145% tariff on Chinese imports, and you would think that companies like Apple get impacted by that a lot, but then you find out, oh yes, there is a carve out for them for the smartphone. So things just tend to come up where they didn't make a big news splash. So right now, I can tell you that if I go back to Canadian tariffs in the food and beverage industry, there are products that United States sells to Canada. And so the manufacturers already put the mechanisms in place to make sure that the tariffs are reflected there. But then at the same token, these same food and beverage manufacturers source their raw materials, their ingredients from the Asian markets. And so the Asian markets have the tariffs on the other side. And guess what happens? If the same company slaps on tariffs on the input into their facility and on the output, all that happens is that prices go up. And so this is a very, very clear example of how in the short term, there is a boost. There's going to be a boost in inflation. But that's just general economics. These guys are going to pass the cost down to the consumer. Or in the example of B2B businesses, they're going to pass down the cost to the next business that's actually making the consumer product with what they got from our customers. And then they're going to be the ones that pass it down. So whether we're talking about chocolate manufacturers, bakeries, or soft beverages, they're all going to pass it down to you because the ingredients are more expensive. So that's just the nature of the beast.
Probably going to see prices go up. That follows from the logic of how tariffs work. What immediate impact does this have on shop floor on the way goods are manufactured. So when prices go up, one assumes that demand is going to go down. So maybe less product will need to be manufactured.
I agree with you, except that assessment might be something more of a long term or longer term horizon outlook. In the immediate near future, the manufacturers don't see this yet. So what happens is a lot of them stock their ingredients, stock their raw materials to some extent because they need continuity in their business operations. And so right now, a lot of them are operating with something that's been stocked already prior to tariffs. So even manufacturers, you'll see that work with just-in-time operation or close to just in time with some inventory. Even them, frequently, they have contracts for deliveries of their ingredients and raw materials. And so the old contracts were made without the tariffs. I can give you a similar example from just a personal life. As soon as the tariffs were announced, I called the car dealer just out of curiosity. I called a Honda car dealer and I asked them, do you now sell all the cars at a higher price? And the answer was no. Even though the tariffs were in place, they said the tariffs applied to the cars that were delivered to the United States by Honda to the dealerships. At the time they were ordered back then. So they were still selling existing inventory until they had to replenish it and then deal with tariffs. I'm just saying it because there is a delay in how these things work. So first they have to clear through their existing inventory. And so going back to process manufacturers, they also have some immediate inventory that, like, the shop floor workers do not see the impact necessarily yet. But in what you are saying, yes, eventually some of these products will be more expensive to produce. And so as they cannot find the customers for those contracts, there will be changes. But those changes might span several months at least, because with commodity traded products, there are contracts that they have to deliver on. And so maybe even in the short term, they'll take a loss on some of these deliveries, but they are already under contractual obligation to deliver that product to their customers. And that contract was made ahead of time. They have their own hedging going on. And when they make those contracts, they try to predict and foresee like the different fluctuations in the market. I do not know how well they predicted what happened. I'm thinking they might take a loss and then deliver, but then the new contracts that are being made right now, that's where the interesting changes are, and those haven't come down to the shop floor yet. There is this inertia in this whole mechanism, but you are right in that one of the possible reactions is to say, well, if I'm going to have this lack of certainty in the markets, I will just make less of a product. But I would say that this isn't a straightforward decision, because none of these production capacity issues can be wound down and wound back up in one day. So if a manufacturer makes a decision to bring the production down, it's going to take them time to bring it back up when necessary. They're basically making a decision to lose a lot of sales. A perfect example in this case is Audi saying, we're going to pause shipments of our vehicles to the United States. They already did that. I don't know if they unpaused it since then or not, because again, there's news exploding everywhere at all times. And so I haven't seen that they reversed that decision. But when they made the decision to no longer ship cars to the United States, that decision is not something where I just push the pause button. You're actually losing sales, because now to bring it back up, it will also take time. Because while you are actually not shipping those cars and the people at the dealership get turned away, those people, some of them who have what's called elastic demand and they can wait, they don't really care about that car. They just like the idea of having that maybe totally souped up Audi, like the sports trim, and they can wait. Others who actually need a car, they need it now. There's usually a good reason why they need a car. So if Audi is not shipping anything and somebody needs a car, they're going to go and buy another car. They're not going to wait until Audi decides, oh, now it's safe to do this, to ship cars again, right? And so they're losing sales. It's a slippery slope. So I would say, yes, one of the options, one of the reactions to this whole political and economic conundrum is that manufacturers will pause sales until they get more certainty. The risk there is that you might not get certainty for a while. And then you're basically hurting your sales, your bottom line. And while they're not selling those cars, what do they do with them? Do they just stockpile them? Do they dump them into another market that didn't have the demand for them? You know what that means? It means they have to sell them at a discount. So that isn't really a good strategy. I know there are different companies all thinking about this issue, and you can say, well, instead of pausing sales, we're just going to plow through them. Yes, that's what some other ones are doing. They're not stopping business, they're continuing, but those that are continuing are also taking the losses. So that's the unfortunate outcome of this. I guess the silver lining is in all of this is that now is the time to think, what can I do differently to be more efficient? I know it's like we first did something very sudden. As I was listening to this podcast, I heard Larry Summers, the famous US economist and ex-Harvard professor, and he used to be a Treasury Secretary also. He said, what's been happening is dangerous work with a sledgehammer on a pretty sensitive machine, which is the global economy. So yes, there is some state of confusion, but at the same time, those that invest more in automation are positioning themselves for more success, for less impact of this erratic behavior that's happening in politics and in the economy right now.
I was going to turn to that. So on this podcast, whenever we like to solve problems here, right? So we bring up problems and we propose solutions to them, or partial solutions that people can use in their jobs. And the way we usually look at it is we're not just about technology, even though we're a technology company, but we always look at people, we always look at culture, we always look at process, and we look at technology. So through that lens, when you're looking at a situation like this, what comes up? So do you see do people, do processes, do culture, is that even an issue now? Or is the answer build more resilience and digitalize and go in on technology?
On the people side, I don't think anything has changed yet, again, because there is inertia in all of this. But I can tell you that in terms of digital transformation, yes, there are two things that come to mind. So there are some companies, and I would say that's a very small minority of companies in the United States, that can actually nail down the cost of each widget that they're making, or each drop of liquid product or whatever they're doing, that can nail down the cost per batch. Like we made this much product today and it cost us that much to make it. There's not a lot of companies that can do that. But what I'm thinking about is that capability of improved cost analysis, real-time cost analysis. So this is important. Not like, oh, in general, it costs us this much to make this product, but knowing in real time how much it costs you, coupled with digital supply chain. So you have your suppliers plug into your ecosystem with the software so that you get visibility into what you're buying. Those two things coupled together would give companies the ability to make the right decisions. So, for example, if the administration and the government is changing rules and there are tariffs today on something, but then there's a 90-day pause, then there are tariffs again, what you could be doing is you could be looking in real time at the products that you're sourcing from your suppliers and figuring out the optimal mix, right? In case you need to do product substitution, you could do it. But tell me, how many companies can actually react that quickly and say, well, if I'm ordering this ingredient and it comes from China, now it's too expensive, but I can order a substitute for it from elsewhere in Asia, and then I only have this 10% tariff, so let's substitute it. Like, this needs to start happening quickly everywhere, and a lot of people would be doing it in Excel. And we've talked a lot about Excel here. That is digital paper. You make some decisions and then you can't easily find what you did a month ago. You can't easily trace it. You can't fix the issues in a systematic way. So this is where software solutions actually help with this kind of stuff. But the catch is that none of those software solutions can be turned on overnight. So this goes to say that now is the time to find the right partner that will help you navigate through these uncertain times and give you more peace of mind. And by partner, I mean the technical companies that can actually guide you through the digital transformation and reduce your risk exposure.
So is it more about being agile and quick to react and plan better? And is it less about improving efficiency at this point when it's about tariffs?
I think they go hand in hand. And I can give you an example. So if we're talking about a soft drink manufacturing company, they usually have multiple options in terms of where they can get their ingredients that actually make the final product that you buy at the store. And you don't know it, but they've dealt with this issue for many, many years because there is such a thing as seasonality. And so during certain seasons, they get shipments of similar product from one country. During certain other seasons, they get similar product from another country. That has existed for a long time. So now in those industries, they know how to substitute. Now, what they may be lacking is the systems that tell them that now is the good time to substitute X for Y because there are tariffs in place and they're changing. And what I'm seeing is that with this uncertain way of how the tariffs are implemented, one day we're thinking we're going to have something, and then another day we're finding out that no, it's delayed for another 3 months. Well, during those 3 months, you can source a lot of product, right? It's almost like you need to have systems that allow you to purchase your ingredients, your raw materials, with that real-time information about what's happening with tariffs. I don't know if that mechanism has been built yet, but I can certainly see demand for it now. Because whatever that latest guidance is now needs to be fed into the systems, and you're resetting the rules of the game for a short period of time until the next time that it happens again. But it definitely creates market opportunities here.
Does AI come into the picture here? Because anytime we've been talking about tech, AI just came up. And is this an area where AI can come to the rescue, at least partially?
Yes, I think basic AI that would give you pattern analysis and linear regression would definitely help out in this case, because if you think about it, you have a lot of data about the changes in demand for certain products. Now, there's a part of this that says, yes, definitely throw the machine learning algorithms on top of the demand data and then tell the manufacturers that here's what's going to be in demand, and therefore prepare all your ingredients, prepare your manufacturing capacity to make this. One good example of this is Amazon, where Amazon actually predicts what you're going to buy ahead of time. That's how in the US and many countries in Europe, they're able to ship things to your house so quickly. Yes, that's your predictive analytics and machine learning. However, there is a caveat to all this. The degree of uncertainty that's added by the ever-changing rules of the game with the tariffs policy might cause some noise in the predictions, and the predictions will be less accurate. However, again, this is something that I see as a short-term, relatively short-term, don't ask me how many months, but relatively short-term phenomenon, that the fluctuations in the policy affect the market this way. Why? Because I think that once the Trump administration sort of settles with these negotiations that they perceive as the negotiations they're having. So, for example, they're saying there are countries coming to negotiate deals with them, right? So once some countries negotiate whatever and the administration moves on to the other set of countries, those that already finished their negotiation will actually turn around and do something sneaky. Some of them will, I'm sure. Maybe not at the government level, but their companies will, where they will change the supply chain by actually getting stuff from the countries with higher tariffs to themselves, and then doing something and selling that product back to the United States with a label that says that it's done in a different country now. You know, this example that we read in the news about with the war in Ukraine, Russia was under sanctions and they started selling oil to other countries where they would actually mix it, and it would be 49% their oil and 51% somebody else's oil. And so then the final product was being sold as non-Russian oil, but whatever other foreign oil. So I'm thinking the same mechanism could be applied when Vietnam or another country in Asia that's relatively close to China, they buy products from China, they add their own component and make sure it's like some kind of 49-51 mix, and then they slap the label made in Vietnam and they sell it back to the United States. And by that time, when that happens, the focus of the government and the administration will be on some other countries. So when that happens, it's going to stabilize the supply of those products. That's what I'm trying to say. That's why I see that the markets are actually resilient and people figure out things and figure out loopholes and ways to get around things. So there will be a degree of that. It's not like we impose tariffs today and tomorrow all the manufacturing for everything we put tariffs on is brought back to the United States. It just doesn't work that way. And I think people actually understand that. That's why a lot of this is seen as a negotiation tactic. But wherever the tariffs are permanent, people will find ways around them. So this ambiguity is short term.
In your conversation with your clients, is reshoring a topic in conjunction with the tariffs?
Reshoring is an interesting topic. It hasn't come up with the customers yet, but it has come up amongst my connections in the social media and amongst the investors. And so if you think about the general experience that United States managers have in manufacturing space or in other industries, like an average manager in the States does not have any experience in reshoring. Just think about that. So there are investors saying, now is the time, now let's make sure we do this right, and we're going to advise the Trump administration on how to do reshoring. Well, if you think about it, for the last 40 years, the United States has been offshoring jobs overseas, but not reshoring. And I can tell you that the labor laws are unique and difficult. And companies every once in a while have to deal with international transfers of their employees from maybe somewhere in Europe back to the United States on a one-off basis. And it's complicated. And so I thought about this. When we talk about reshoring, who is actually going to do it? Who knows a thing or two about this? It's our allies. It's the allies in the other countries that can actually come here and do some consulting for us. And what the United States would be good for is reverse offshoring, meaning that for the last 40 years, we got so much experience in offshoring that we can now send our managers overseas to those countries from where we want to send jobs back to the United States. You see, we do not have experts in this. And so this tells me that it's going to take a long time. The outcome of this not having experts is going to take a long time to do this. So you would ask, okay, so if reshoring is actually not something that we're very good at, what can we do then to kind of offset our lack of skill in that area? And that's where I can tie it back to more advanced manufacturing and more automation and to the AI. Because if you think about it, it's not like we have cheap labor here. It just is not the same economic conditions. So you can't abandon a factory in country X that had 1,000 people and just give equivalent 1,000 people here in the United States jobs doing the same thing. It will cost you a lot more and you won't be profitable. So to me, if you think about one-for-one exchange, you stop doing production in the factory outside the United States now, you create a similar capacity factory in the States. It's a given that you cannot hire as many people for that factory. So if you think about that, what's your way to go around that problem? You have to automate more. You have no choice. Otherwise, you're going to go broke because you're going to have to pay a lot to those people. So people don't think about this, but to me, it's a no-brainer. We're not good at reshoring. So even if we try with the best of our interests, we're going to make some mistakes and it's going to take time. While we're doing this, you stop production in a factory somewhere in Asia or in China maybe because there are tariffs. You cannot do a one-for-one factory exchange here because it's going to be too expensive. So automation is a given. And since automation is a given, people should just embrace it and make sure that the workforce actually goes through the training and through upskilling, learns new technology, and gets with it. Somebody will do it, right? So the question is it your company or is it somebody else's company that will be ahead of the curve and ahead of the competition?
Do you see a mindset or a way where manufacturers can come out stronger on the other end of this? Because we're assuming that these high tariffs aren't here to stay. So they're definitely temporary because global trade has a tendency to just break down barriers and break down tariffs. So because we got here somehow, we started with high tariffs in the 60s and 70s, and they just gradually broke down. So this is definitely going away sooner or later. And manufacturers and all the actors in the economy will want to make sure that they come out stronger on the other end of this. So do you see a way that makes sure that that happens?
The manufacturers have to increase their resilience, right? Risk tolerance. And the way to do that is to automate more. Yes, some people will tell me, there he goes talking about automation again. But if you think about it, you have to do it in a smart way. So you invest into digital transformation. This will allow you to be more flexible and nimble when the time comes so that you could scale down and scale up with demand without incurring such heavy losses as you're incurring this go around. That's my take on it. If you think about it, people will say, well, but this doesn't help those workers who are put out of their jobs. Yes and no. So in the short term, those people are correct. If I go back to the example of candle makers, when the demand for candles went down, the candle makers were out of their jobs. But this will force the labor force to change their skills, to get retrained, to basically up their game and become more in tune with the modern technologies. And at a macro level, I don't see a problem with that. I think when people tell themselves that nothing is constant and we always have to learn something new, then they have a much easier time accepting the reality that the landscape changes and you need to adapt to it and you need to learn new things. And if AI is here to help us do certain functions more efficiently, let's take advantage of it and let's learn how to harness AI so that we as a society become more productive overall. And so, yes, the companies that go digital, the companies that can then, after that, see all the information about what's happening and they can actually make use of it, will be positioned for greater success and for lower impact economically. So this is a no-brainer. And if people just stop worrying about having to retrain the workforce, it's just take it as a given that every so many years, people need to learn new skills. Then it's sort of less of a shock to people. And yes, I can see that in the future, we're going to have a greater percentage of the workforce that is technically savvy, that knows how to control the AI, and they will just be focused on other types of issues. So less manual work, fewer manual calculations, more work that matters at that point in time. And I don't dare say what exactly that's going to be because I don't know, like many others don't know. We don't have the magic 8 ball that tells us what's going to happen, right? But we know just enough to say that we need to stay relevant. And I will give you a perfect example of an industry that does that very well. You know, for all the innovation in AI, there's no shortage of videos on YouTube talking about how programmers, software developers are going to be out of their jobs in the future. And whichever video you click, depending on how long ago it was made, it will give you a different year when they're predicting that all programmers are going to be out of their jobs. Well, the actual programmers are smarter than that. I can tell you nothing could be further from the truth. It's only those who actually are not real programmers and who stand in place that will be out. But I can tell you most of the programmers learn new skills all the time because the technology changes all the time. And so as the technology changes, you can actually stay with the technology or ahead of the curve and pick up new stuff. And so I can see that the experienced programmers and architects are always going to be in demand because they can see the big picture and they quickly decide what is a better option for this or that problem, for this solution or that solution, you know. So it doesn't matter how many times you see a video on YouTube that says coding is dead. There's going to be no more programmers. AI is going to replace everyone. Yeah, that's just there as clickbait to make sure you click on it and watch the video. But what's happening actually is that these same programmers, the smart ones, are going ahead of the game all the time. And they are the ones that are dictating how this landscape changes. It's a very interesting example. So I think we can observe that, learn from it, and extrapolate that to the industrial workforce and say, yes, the workforce, they're not stupid. They're not stupid. They're smart people that adapt to different reality and new conditions. And yes, there will be AI chatbots on the shop floor that help the modern day shop floor worker do this and that. So I'll give you an example. The standard operating procedures. In a few years, nobody is ever going to pull the binder off of the shelf again. The AI chatbot will be there to answer the question. How do I troubleshoot my equipment? How do I find this? Like, what does this number mean on that screen? Instead of going and looking it up in the user manual, the AI chatbot will just tell you, this is what that is. So much faster, so much easier. So the workforce will see it and definitely adjust to the new reality and just work differently. So the whole argument about, hey, like this automation is going to affect jobs, in the long term, it's all good. Short term, yes, you just need to tell people to open up their minds and see what new skills they want to learn. But that, I think, that understanding and the drive for greater automation and greater digital transformation to make sure that all these companies go up in terms of their digital maturity, yes, that is going to make us some winners for the months to come and years to come.
Okay, that's a great way to end this not entirely positive and optimistic topic. So thanks a lot, Konstantin. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.